Today, we're looking at the BLON BL A8 Prometheus. Let's go. What's cracking, audio fans? It's David here from Prime Audio Reviews. I'm here with the BLON BL A8. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, so we're going to get right into it. There's the box, a bit nicer than the previous BLON ones. Usual stuff inside, and here are the earphones, and you've probably seen these already. If you haven't, feast your eyes on those. Right, so here are the earpieces, and yes, they do look a bit weird. They look a bit like silver jewelry or silver earrings or something, but in actual fact, these are basically just like a regular IEM shell, but hollowed out in the middle and with all these holes. But apart from that, they just fit in your ears exactly the same way. So in terms of comfort, for me, I find these really, really comfortable. Very nice indeed. As far as the look go, yeah, I kind of dig it. It's nice and unusual. It's innovative. And I don't care too much about how my earphones look. I care about how they feel in terms of comfort and how they sound. So, but yeah, that's cool. That's pretty damn cool. And here is the cable, and this is by far the nicest cable that we've seen from BLON so far. Cable handles nicely, it feels really nice, it looks good. So yeah, good cable. And now on to the sound, and how does the BL A8 sound? Well, it has got a, I would call it a bass dominant, warm sound signature. That pretty much sums it up, to be honest, but I'll break it down. We'll start with the bass. Let's throw up the frequency response here. And as you can see, these have got some pretty pushed up, pretty elevated sub bass shelf. And yeah, these will rumble, man. Like this is the kind of sub bass that can almost make you shit your pants. You know what I'm talking about? It digs deep and you'll feel that sub bass, and that is thrilling indeed. But it's not all good, and we'll get to that why in a moment. The mid bass is slightly less elevated than the sub bass, but it's still up there. The bass overall, the quality of it is not that great. Like I do enjoy the sub bass rumble. That's pretty thrilling. It is something to behold. But the bass overall is a little bit mushy. It's a little bit blunted, the attack on kick drums and things like that. The texture is okay, but the speed isn't there. The definition isn't really there. It's just kind of a messy bass, to be honest. It's basically the big problem is the amount of elevation. It's just pushed up a bit too far, in my opinion, for my personal preference. I think if you're gonna have a bass head IEM, you have to concentrate really on getting the quality of the bass up there as well as the quantity. So that is the bass. Now onto the mid-range, and the mids are a little bit recessed. Actually, the lower mid-range is a bit on the thin side, actually. It falls off rather rapidly after that mid-bass, and in the lower mid-bass, it's a little bit hollow. It's a little bit lacking some body there, and it makes an unusual contrast with that huge bass. Vocals don't sound too bad. They are a little bit recessed. They are a bit softened, not really articulate. The overall clarity of the A8 is not great. It's a little bit of a dark sound, a little bit thick throughout the sound, even though the mid-range is kind of thin, particularly the lower mids are kind of thin. It's still overall a thick sound. And the mid-range resolution is not that great either. It's not terrible, but I mean, there's a lot of really good competition in this price range, and the resolution just doesn't really match any of the top ones, the top models. And that leaves us with the treble, and the treble is a bit elevated as well. So you've got a hugely elevated bass, you've got a fairly elevated treble, so you end up with a V-shaped signature. I don't mind a V-shape, but I just don't think this one has been executed all that well. The treble peaks at 6 kilohertz, and before that there's a dip around 5 kilohertz. Now 5 kilohertz is where you get your vocal presence. It adds a bit of life and dynamics to the sound. But these kind of dip there, where all these ones generally have somewhat of a peak at 5 kilohertz. But these ones dip, then you get a peak at 6 kilohertz, which every now and then produces a little bit of sibilance. Not often, but it is there. There is some occasional sharpness, high-pitched electric guitars, high upper registers of pianos and things like that, for example. And then we've got another peak at 9 kilohertz and another one further on. So the extension of the treble is actually okay, but a lot of those treble harmonics, that sort of trailing note after a hit, they're kind of muffled or subdued by just the sheer amount of bass. They kind of get buried under the bass, so you don't hear the natural sheen or the decay of cymbals and hi-hats, etc. So overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag, a little disappointing in audio quality, to be honest, but all of these IEMs you see here are all the same price. They're all about $79 or $80 for all of these. We'll start with the Wizzer HE01. Now this is, actually this is a little bit unfair because I've got all the sub 100 kings here on the table. These are all probably the top 3 best sub 100 IEMs at the moment. You've got the Wizzer HE01 here, which has a similarly warm sound signature, but it's got less bass quantity, and the bass that it does have is just better defined. It's cleaner, it's faster, but definitely not as much bass. And then when you get into the mid-range, the lower mid-range, this has more body in the lower mid-range. It's a little bit fuller, a little bit more natural. So you get the warmth from the mid-range itself, whereas all the warmth here comes from that huge bass. The HE01 has better clarity throughout. It's got better resolution, similar detail retrieval, I would say. Depending on the track, when the bass ramps up, the A8 loses a fair bit of its technicality or technical abilities. So you get this kind of subdued, relaxed treble. It's definitely non-fatiguing, but because the bass is not pushed up, the mids are fairly relaxed and smooth, the treble's got plenty of room to breathe and comes out, so you don't need a big treble with these ones. But overall, you know, great earphone. So definitely the HE01 would be my choice there. Here is the Moondrop Aria. Now the Aria again has a lot less bass than the A8 here. After the bass, when you get to the mid-range, the frequency response of these two actually looks quite similar. So you can kind of see maybe what BLON was going for, but they just wanted to have a sort of a bassier, sort of a more fun, more dynamic sound, but it just didn't work out for whatever reasons. But less bass on the Aria, better definition in the bass, it's cleaner, it's got a sharper attack on it, it's snappier, it's faster. When you get to the mid-range is also slightly thin on the Aria, but it's not contending with that big bass, so it's allowed to come forward much more readily. And in the treble, it's got that typical sort of Moondrop relaxed treble sound, but at the same time the treble extension is good, so there is plenty of air in there. It's not a real sparkly treble, but because of the lean bass and the neutral mid-range, the treble comes forward. It doesn't have to be big to compete with everything else. So again, the Aria is my pick over the BLON. And finally, we've got the Hi-Diz MS2. Oh, by the way, these are both single dynamic drivers. This is a hybrid dual driver, one dynamic, one balanced armature. And again, this one has less bass than the BLON A8. Now, I'm not a bass hater. I actually love to have a good bassy set or good bassy earphone, but it has to be a good quality bass, and you don't quite get that here. But the MS2, it's got less bass quantity, it's got a faster, cleaner bass, tighter bass. In the mid-range, it's got exceptional clarity, really, really good clarity. Miles ahead of this, probably ahead of the O1, probably even ahead of the Aria, if I remember correctly. I'd have to listen to them side by side, but excellent clarity throughout the mid-range, excellent mid-range or overall resolution. And in the treble, it's got a nice detailed, light, slightly sparkly treble, but one that's extremely smooth, very non-fatiguing. This is a killer IEM. This is a really good one. Actually, these three here, they're all so good. I couldn't tell you which is the best one. It would depend on your personal preferences and what kind of things you're looking for. But anyway, I digress. Back to the A8 here, and to summarize, huge bass, massive sub bass, but not a really good quality bass. Slightly recessed mids, slightly unusual overall tonality. I'll leave it at that, guys. I'm just rambling on here. So there's a link to the written review in the description below. There is also links to my social media channels in the description box below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, Parfam audiophile style. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more reviews like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And until next time, I'll see you later.